Accessibility. Luis Perez is a nationally known expert on accessible materials. He makes an analogy between blueberry muffins and accessibility. If you have a muffin and dump blueberries on it, do you have a blueberry muffin? The answer, of course, is that the blueberries have to be mixed in with the muffin batter. Similarly, accessibility needs to happen during development of a material or lesson plan, not retrospectively. Here is a reflection question awaiting your response. Think about an upcoming lesson plan. What are the potential barriers to participation? How can you address these issues from the start of your lesson plan? Why are we focusing on accessibility? When materials are flexible, they are less likely to create barriers to learning. Also, like we saw in the blueberry muffin analogy, it is most efficient to think about accessibility when you are designing instead of having to consider it later on. You can also think about the moral reasons why accessibility is important. Computer science conveys important 21st century skills students can use in their future careers and/or other aspects of their lives. If we say computer science is important for all, that includes students with disabilities. For some students, in order to participate, accessible lessons are needed in order for them to fully participate. Besides the moral reasons to include accessibility in your lesson planning, there are also legal reasons why it is important. Section 2 of the Americans with Disabilities Act requires state governments, including public schools, to provide reasonable modifications for access, including auxiliary services. Many school districts receive federal funds, which means they have to follow the Rehabilitation Act. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act requires students to not be excluded from any federal-funded activities. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act requires access to electronic material. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requires a free and appropriate public education as well as education offered within the least restrictive environment. There are many accessibility considerations. I'm going to focus on a few. First, visual information can be supported throughout text or images, color contrasts, and not using a single color. One resource you can use is WebAIM''S contrast checker. For students who may be learning English or have a language-based learning or intellectual disability, look at the language level and make sure the directions are as easy to understand as possible. One resource you can use is Cambridge University Press's language level checker. In this module, we will be discussing how to evaluate accessibility when you plan a lesson. Often, making computer science education more inclusive involves focusing on accessibility needs of students with disabilities. In this module, we will be learning about the need to prioritize accessibility in lesson planning, discussing the use of assistive technologies and accessible technologies, and discuss the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust core framework, which you will use to analyze the accessibility of a technology, material, or resource you plan to use in a lesson. At the end of this module, you will be able to value prioritizing accessibility in lesson planning, define assistive technologies and accessible technologies, use core to evaluate